Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by The Athletic and CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got a good friend of the program, Ricky O'Donnell from SB Nation, coming on to talk about the Central Division in the NBA. We're going to break down and preview all 5 of those teams in this order. It will be the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Chicago Bulls, the Indiana Pacers, and the Detroit Pistons. But before we get there, Ricky, how's it going, man?
I'm good, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm always happy to have you on this show. It's been a rough weekend for me. Basically my 2 favorite football teams. Ohio State got just fucking demolished on Saturday night by Oklahoma. And then on Friday night, Essendon over in Australia. Longtime followers of me know that Laura, my girlfriend, is Australian. And, we have picked up her Australian football team as basically one of the 2 teams in the world that I care about, still doing this professionally and everything. And they got beaten by like 65 points, which would be the equivalent of an American football team losing by like 30 points in a playoff game. So I was just basically demoralized for like a 24-hour period starting on Friday night through like Saturday night. So was your weekend a little bit better than that, Ricky?
Yeah, I had a great weekend. I don't care about Australian rules football at all, but I do appreciate you still having me on the podcast despite that.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything's good for me.
Yeah, and like it looked like the Bull with the Bears, things looked a little bit better than what people thought. Maybe like not disastrous, at least.
It's really a testament just to expectations in general, because the Bears have been so bad the last few years that I didn't even expect them to get within 3 touchdowns of the Falcons. They've been playing at home. So the fact that they were in the game until the last play, some of the young guys looked pretty good. I was totally satisfied with that game, and it wasn't frustrating. It wasn't anything. I was just happy that they didn't get blown out. So yeah.
We'll talk about the Bears a little bit later during our ad read. Today's sponsor is FanDuel. We'll talk about them a little bit later on. You can use my promo code GameTheory, GAMETHEORY, to do whatever they're offering. I'm not even sure what it is anymore. Let's go ahead and talk about basketball, though. I feel like that's why everyone is here. Like I said, we're going to start with the Cleveland Cavaliers here. I feel like they are the most interesting team in the Central Division and one of the most interesting teams in the NBA, if not the most interesting situation, at least in the NBA, due to the roster turnover that has happened this summer.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I mean, the Cavs are going to be the biggest story of the season in the NBA to me, mostly because of LeBron's impending free agency. I mean, if LeBron moves, the entire balance of power of the league shifts tremendously. And, with the decision to trade Kyrie, it's setting up for a year that's going to be extremely stressful, I think, for Cleveland fans, and something where they're not going to have much margin for error.
Yeah, I'm very interested in seeing just what that margin for error is, especially early in the year. Like, I don't think LeBron cares about home court advantage in the playoffs, but just given like some of these players on this team, like it does seem like they could be helped by having a crowd behind them. Like Tristan Thompson, I think helps. It helps his energy to have a crowd behind him. We saw the way Isaiah Thomas fed off of energy from the crowd whenever he played in Boston. And guys like Kevin Love and J.R. Smith, they're confidence players a lot of the time. I think that home court advantage in that factor here and, finishing at the top of the conference is being a little bit underrated for them. Like everyone's saying, like, it doesn't matter if they finish first, second, third, or eighth. They're just going to get it done in the playoffs. I don't know if I feel that way about this team right now.
Well, they definitely have a legit challenger, I think, this year in Boston they added Gordon Hayward and Kyrie Irving. Like, they're going to be better than they were last year, I think, for sure, in terms of the Celtics. And for the Cavs, we've seen since LeBron has returned to Cleveland, he really has played good cop, bad cop during the regular season with a lot of his teammates to try to get them, I guess, even mentally prepared for what it's going to be like during the playoffs. This is a Cleveland team this year that did have a lot of turnover. They're going to be working in Derrick Rose, working in Jay Crowder, IT, hopefully. So, I don't expect there to be any less drama surrounding the Cavs than there has been over the last few off seasons, because, this is it. You're either going to step up and you're going to keep LeBron. I remember LeBron saying back when the Heat got drilled by the Spurs in the NBA Finals that one year, and then he went to Cleveland the next offseason. I remember LeBron saying, it would have been almost impossible for me to leave had we won this series. So, yeah. I mean, that's the type of pressure the Cavs are going to be dealing with here. Like, the performance, like how they perform this season is going to be directly tied to what LeBron does this summer, I think.
Yeah, no, that I 100% agree with. And when evaluating that performance, I feel like there are two separate ways that we can evaluate this team. So let's kind of do that real quick. I think that this team is very different with Isaiah Thomas and without Isaiah Thomas. And that obviously goes without saying whenever you're talking about an all-NBA level player. And what his injury is and when he can come back, because there is still so much mystery shrouding that, is really going to play such a pivotal role in this NBA season that I feel like we kind of have to just break down both sides of this. So let's kind of say without Isaiah Thomas here, what do we think this Cleveland Cavaliers team is? What do we think that this team is capable of with, I would imagine the starting lineup is then probably Derrick Rose, J.R. Smith, LeBron, Kevin Love, Tristan Thompson with, whatever they do with Amon Shumpert, if he's on the team, if he's not on the team. Still have Channing Frye. Jay Crowder is here. I don't really know. I would imagine Jay Crowder probably comes off the bench in that case, right? Like, do we think Jay Crowder comes off the bench? I
feel like Jay Crowder is going to be in the closing lineup, but maybe not the starting lineup.
Yeah, that I agree with. I feel like Kevin Love and Tristan Thompson, they're just so established there, and plus obviously LeBron is going to start, that, do they start Jay Crowder over JR? I can't really see that. Can you?
No, but, Crowder is a good example of a type of player who gives them a lot of lineup flexibility. Could we see lineups with LeBron at the 5, Crowder at the 4 this year? I mean, they're going to have to at least give that lineup some run, because you think that they're probably going to have to use it against Golden State if they get back to the finals.
Yep.
So they have a lot of interesting lineup decisions. This is going to be a big year for Ty Lue as well. I think that Ty Lue's he's had the magic touch, I guess, for the most part. That's what happens when you win the title of your first year as a head coach. But, we'll see. They're going to have a lot of options to play with. A lot of it comes back to, how effective are the guards going to be. You don't know what you're going to get from IT. You really don't know what you're going to get from D-Rose. There's a lot of question marks with this team.
Yeah, I would imagine Jay Crowder is in every closing lineup. For me, Jay Crowder is one of the 75 or 80 best players in the NBA. You know what I mean?
For sure.
He's just too versatile. He can knock down threes. Defensively, he can guard basically 1 through 5 at times. He's a little small to guard 5s, but if lineups are downsized, he can probably handle it a little bit. They also bring in Jetty Osman, who's having a pretty solid Eurobasket right now. He's been one of the better prospects overseas for a while. I believe he was 31st overall in the 2015 NBA draft, thinking back on it. 6'8", can knock down threes, can pass the ball a little bit. He's going to be another versatile piece that works well, hopefully, against the Warriors due to the lineup versatility that he brings.
Yeah, you could talk about him more than I would, but if he's even, a rotation forward for them, that's certainly going to be big, especially during the regular season when they're going to need all the bodies they can get.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what he is in his first year. I think he's a rotation player who can really help the Cavs, create different lineup combinations. I talk about connecting players all the time on this podcast. Jay Crowder is a connecting player. He allows you to play small with him at the 4. He allows you, realistically, you could play him at the 2 and play super big if you wanted. I don't know if it would be super duper effective, but you could play that way. I think Usman is the same kind of guy, right? You can, play him at the 3, play him at the 2. You can let him kind of handle some lead ball duties occasionally, but not super often. If you want to run Derrick Rose off the ball for one possession, Usman can come in and, at least handle and initiate the offense. That kind of piece is really valuable for a Cavaliers team that is essentially, playing to play Golden State. That's what their season revolves around. Their season, I just said at the top, I think that they are, home court advantage is a little bit more important to them, but the only thing that matters to them is if they win the NBA title. I think that they are going to have to fight to get out of the Eastern Conference this year, but that's not their goal. Their goal is championship. So I do think that getting Osman, getting Jay Crowder, those two pieces do really, really help them. And, Jeff Green is at least like a body to throw at Golden State. I don't know if, he's never been a great defender, but he's 6'9" and he's big and can take up minutes, hopefully.
Yeah, I'd be down for a late career Jeff Green renaissance. In the right situation, I feel like on a minimum contract, perhaps he could give them some good minutes in the right matchup. But I mean, at this point, he's probably mostly a lost cause, but at least the price is right this year.
Yeah, like anyone you talk to around the NBA says like Jeff Green is a great dude and he's awesome to have on your team. I do hope that he does kind of find this late career renaissance. I'm with you. I like when good people are successful, and I've heard nothing but good things about Jeff Green. Let's talk about with Isaiah Thomas now, though. Isaiah, what do you think his effect is on how this roster works? Because there's been a lot of discussion about how Kevin Love has been much better without Kyrie Irving on the floor. Just looking at his numbers, they go up drastically. His efficiency is better. Just everything about Kevin Love's game seemed to be unlocked when Kyrie wasn't on the floor. Do you think that the Isaiah Thomas, mixture with Kevin Love is going to be better or worse than it was with Kyrie?
I mean, I really feel like everything starts and ends with the hip. I mean, you just don't know how effective IT is going to be. So if we're just going to operate under the assumption that IT can perform around how effective he was last year.
Yeah, let's say this is like March and we're at that point. Like, IT is, playing well and getting there.
Sure, I think at that point, really, IT and Kyrie's skill sets are pretty similar. The main difference between them is that Kyrie is taller. I mean, that's the most obvious thing. But I think, IT is going to have the ball in his hands a lot. I think that, maybe he'll be a little bit, he'll defer to Love a little bit more, because it seems like for the last 3 years, the story of the Cavs regular season has been trying to get Kevin Love engaged and productive, to get him, to be that other offensive option for them who can carry him when LeBron can't go every single night, carrying the offense. So, yeah, I think that for sure IT and Love, there probably won't be any animosity there. They're going to want to get on the same page. I don't expect IT to be, gunning for contract year numbers in this situation with Cleveland. And I think that'll benefit Love, because the more Kevin Love gets the ball, the better the Cavs are going to be, both in the short term and when the playoffs come around.
Yeah, look, last year was Kevin Love's best season in Cleveland, I thought. I thought it was pretty clear, to be honest. He finally looked a lot more comfortable. He knocked down threes at a slightly higher rate. He was much more, seemingly efficient with his shot selection inside as well. They let him play a little bit more inside. To me, it seemed like. I know that his 3-point attempts per game went up, but it did seem like in certain lineups they would allow him to just kind of, man the middle and, play that, low to mid high post game. The question with me has always been, was it a personal thing with Kyrie and Kevin Love, or was it a fit on the floor thing? With Isaiah Thomas, if he's healthy, there's going to be absolutely no personal issue there. Like their former AAU teammates going back a decade ago. Like these two guys are going to be, compatible in terms of personality and everything. It's just whether or not they fit together on the floor. And I think that, I never really got why the Kyrie Kevin Love thing didn't work on the floor. I guess that maybe Kyrie was just not necessarily a, willing passer, I guess. And Kevin Love has always been a very willing passer. Isaiah Thomas, I would imagine, I think he has worse vision than Kyrie, but I also think that he ends up being a little bit more willing of a passer at times whenever he doesn't have to look for his own shot, if that makes sense.
Totally.
I think that when he's not counted on to get his shot every single time, he's willing to pass the ball and willing to, get within the motion of the offense. I think it's going to work if Isaiah Thomas is healthy, but, do we think Isaiah Thomas's health is a necessary factor for this team to compete for an NBA championship? Because when I talked about this trade with Kyrie for Jay Crowder, Isaiah Thomas, Ante Zizic, who we haven't even talked about, which I don't know that we need to. He'll be like a 10-minute a game backup center this year if necessary. He's more of a long-term piece. And then also that Brooklyn pick. I talked about Isaiah Thomas as being the third most valuable piece in that deal because I thought Jay Crowder on a 3-year deal was more important. I thought the Brooklyn pick was more important. Do we think that Isaiah Thomas is a necessary piece for them to compete for an NBA title against Golden State?
I think he'll be more important just to get him there because we all assume that Cleveland's going to get there every time they have LeBron. But we saw during the regular season last year, the defense was just so poor. There were real cracks in the Cavs' armor heading into the playoffs last season.
Right.
Of course, you feel foolish for doubting them in the moment because they get everything, in line by the time the playoffs roll around and eventually make the finals and put up a decent fight once again there. But I think they're going to need IT in the matchups before the Warriors. And so if you're just going to eliminate Kyrie Irving and you're going to replace him with D Rose, that's going to leave a pretty big gap in production in terms of what you're trying to fill. So I think they're going to need IT for sure.
So I guess that my question is, against the Warriors, does IT help you more than he hurts with the way that they're just going to attack mismatches on him? You know what I mean? Like, you can play the most versatile lineup you can play. Like, you can throw Jay Crowder, you can throw LeBron, Tristan, and one of Cedi Osman or Iman Shumpert or J.R. Smith out there, and you can have like a versatile lineup with everyone being between 6'5" and 6'9" and being able to switch everything. But with Isaiah out there, they're just going to attack Isaiah every time. So, like, do you think that he helps them against Golden State more than he hurts in a 7-game series where they're just going to go at him constantly and make the Cavs adjust?
Against Golden State, for sure. Thomas is going to have major issues against the Warriors. But like I was saying, I think that he'll be bigger just in terms of getting them through the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
The lineups they're going to have to play against Golden State are going to be fascinating, I think. If they can get anything from Rose, that'll be huge for them.
Yep.
Rose did average 18 a game last year, and I think 47% shooting from the field. He obviously has a ton of flaws as a player in terms of his jump shot, his free throw drawing ability, his defense. But I do think that there's, the potential for LeBron to sort of light a fire under Rose and get him to, play a little harder on the defensive end, give a little more consistent effort. And this is also going to be one of the first times Rose is going to be in a winning situation in a while. So I think that, all those things could be a factor in maybe D Rose giving him more than you would expect this year. But, they're going to have a lot of interesting matchup, questions when the Golden State matchup eventually rolls around.
Yeah. Is there anything else we want to talk about with Cleveland here? I feel like we've kind of discussed this to death. Getting through the Eastern Conference, I do agree with you that Isaiah Thomas is going to play a pivotal role. If he's not there, they are vulnerable in the East for sure. Teams like Boston, like Washington, like Toronto, I think could even cause them issues. But at the end of the day, this team does still have LeBron James. He is still, for my money, the best player in the NBA. I know that, so some people are kind of at the point where they think that might be shifting, but for me, LeBron is still just unbelievable. I don't know. I don't know that there's anything else to say other than they probably need Isaiah to get through the East, but they also still are probably second place behind Golden State pretty clearly. Yeah.
I totally agree, and I think that we're probably shaping up for, just think about how much the NBA, the landscape of the NBA shifted this offseason with all the star movement.
Yep.
I think it's probably going to happen again next year, and I think a lot of it is a response to this Golden State team just being such a juggernaut.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's basically all because of that. Like, everyone is scrambling for answers. Everyone who is trying to compete for a title is scrambling and trying to make drastic moves instead of in the past they would just make very simple moves to try and just push them slightly over the top. It's a really, really difficult concept. I think I'm going to be very interested to see how the offseason next year works and how this year is a direct, a direct reason why teams make the moves they make next offseason.
Definitely.
Let's go ahead and move on and talk about Milwaukee. The Milwaukee Bucks or one of the most interesting teams in the NBA to me for sure. Last year they finished 42-40, a bit of a rebound from the previous year. The story of last year for them was obviously just Giannis Antetokounmpo going from very, very interesting potential top 10 NBA player at some point to holy shit, he's 22 years old. He's already a top 10 player in the NBA. He might be like one of the 5 most important players in the NBA right now. Like that's the leap that he made last year, going from, solid potential future piece to second team All NBA, second team All NBA defense, capable of averaging 22 points a game and 5 assists and 8 rebounds and, blocking shots and getting steals and becoming a one-man fast break and becoming a one-man fast break shutdown option defensively. Everything about Giannis's year, I feel like, has changed the trajectory of this Milwaukee Bucks organization, and it's made them, I think, kind of move into place a little bit more quickly than maybe they were anticipating.
Yeah, absolutely. And now what's interesting is the supporting pieces, I think. You have the clear stud in Giannis. And I always think, what is Giannis, Karl Towns, Kristaps to a lesser extent, what are these guys thinking when they see the way the Warriors run the league? Are they thinking that, this is something we have to do in a few years, just to, have a chance at winning? This is sort of the way the league has been trending the last few years post LeBron going to Miami or even, the Big Three in Boston. So I think that there's a ton of pressure on the Bucks to at least hit doubles on a lot of these draft picks. I think that it certainly looks like they did that with Malcolm Brogdon. Thon Maker looked very promising as a rookie. I think that he could be a nice piece for him. Mm-hmm. Middleton, when he got back on the floor last year, the team improved quite a bit. You would think that he's the exact type of player you want around someone with Giannis' skill set. Exactly. And then the swing guy is Jabari.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens with Jabari's knee injury, but it's the Bucks have hit the point where they've used up a lot of the high draft picks they're going to get. The Bucks are not going to be in the lottery anymore, right? So now these dudes that they took, Maker, Brogdon, Parker, this is it. I mean, those guys need to come together and step their game up another level the same way Giannis did if, they really want to build something that's sustainable for the future.
Yeah, so we kind of talked about Giannis, and I 100% agree with you that, the hardest part here is finding the star. Milwaukee has done that, especially for small market teams like Milwaukee. That's the hardest part. And now they have a 4-year window with Giannis, right? They have to show Giannis that he is on the right track to becoming an NBA champion in Milwaukee. And the pieces they have currently are very interesting. They have a lot of high-end assets that will work either as developmental pieces for them or as trade assets down the road. I don't think that they were ever actually going to trade Chris Middleton, to be honest. I just don't. They really, really love Middleton there. I know that was a rumor. But having said that, he is, to me, I think he's going to be an all-star this year. Coming off of the ridiculous, terrible hamstring injury or whatever he had, to average 15 points and 4 rebounds and 4 assists a game that he did and playing solid defense, he's the perfect guy to have next to Giannis, as you mentioned. And I think that trajectory continues as he gets healthier this year. I think that he's going to average in 2016, he averaged 18, 4, and 4. I think he gets up to coming off of this injury now, healthy, he averages 19, 5 rebounds, 4 assists while playing awesome defense. And in the Eastern Conference, to me, that's probably an all-star this year, just given the exodus of stars that we've seen from the Eastern Conference to the Western Conference. So if they have that secondary star in Chris Middleton, I think that's actually a really important factor for them and an important factor in them going forward as a team that could be a top 4 team in the East this year if things really broke right.
Yeah, Middleton's going to need people like me and you to make his all-star case because his game really is not very flashy. He's not going to do much off the dribble, I feel like.
Chris Middleton is the next Paul Millsap all-star, where nothing he does is sexy, but right. He is absolutely one of the most valuable pieces in the NBA, really. I think he's a top 40 player in the NBA.
I totally agree, man. Middleton's awesome. The Bucks are another team, Giannis is the ultimate queen of the chessboard in the sense, right? Where, you could play him at point guard or center or anything in between, really. I mean, theoretically. So for the Bucks, I think it's just all about maximizing, all the pieces around him to give him the best chance to be the best player in the league, which is probably the type of potential he has down the line. Middleton is a total stud. I completely agree with you. They just need him to stay healthy, and I would love to see what this Bucks team could do if they could keep Middleton, Jabari, and Giannis on the floor all at the same time, especially with some nice complementary pieces now in Brogdon and Maker.
Yeah, so let's talk about Jabari real quick before we get into last year's draft, because they knocked last year's draft out of the park, and that's a really important part of their development now. Jabari, for me, is the biggest swing piece in the NBA right
Totally.
now. Before he got hurt last year, he was putting up a borderline all-star season. He was averaging 20 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists on efficient play, and looked like he was becoming that weapon where he could either take over the offense and start to play in the high post, he could play in the mid post, he could play on the wing and attack closeouts and spot up and knock down threes. That was actually a really big part of his game. He started knocking down more and more threes. But he could play on ball or off ball, and I think that's a really important piece to also have next to Giannis. Parker, though, is now coming off of his second knee injury, and the track record isn't great for players where that has happened. No one has done it as young as Jabari has now, where they've blown out their knee twice in the NBA at 21 years old or 22 years old or whatever. I really think that if he can come back and be the player he was just this year, I think that would be really important. Say his ceiling is what he was this year. I don't think that it was that before this second injury. We were seeing growth day by day in Jabari in a way that was really important. But say that even he can get back to what he was before this injury is his peak. That's just such an incredible piece for them to have. That's another borderline all-star on this team.
Yeah, I think the thing with Jabari is that it's still questionable how much he actually contributes to winning, because he's always going to be a defensive liability. Is it in the right situation? If you put him on the Nets and made him the primary offensive option, I have no doubt that Jabari Parker could average, 23, 24, 25 points a game. But that's just not the reality he has facing him in Milwaukee right now. It's Giannis' show. Giannis is going to be one of the biggest stars in the league. So it's about how everyone slots in around Giannis. And if Jabari can get back his athleticism that he showed even after the first ACL tear, I thought he looked more athletic after the first ACL tear than he ever did at Duke in terms of being a baseline power dunker who at 250 pounds could finish above the rim just effortlessly. As you said, he really started to develop his outside shooting stroke a bit. Jabari's got a ton of talent. We've known that from the very start. It's just about, can that talent really translate? Can he have a positive impact on winning games?
Yeah, I think that that's a really interesting point. And I will say this about Jabari. I agree with you in terms of his half-court explosiveness, right? He was always, for me, he was probably, when his draft class came around, he was probably the best transition player I had seen since LeBron, right? He was just that guy who could grab and go and was a freight train, and literally nobody could stop him that was under 25 years old. You know what I mean? He was just a grab and go guy who was explosive and who could get out in the open floor and go. I would say that this year I saw more of that half-court explosiveness, the baseline dunks, as you had mentioned. The first step looked a little bit tighter. It looked a little bit quicker. It allowed him to get that initial burst of space that you need whenever you are 250 pounds and you are a big body like he is, to become the superstar level that he is, in my opinion, always been capable of. I've always bought into him potentially being a top 15 player in the NBA if things absolutely broke right. I'm a little bit questionable on that now, obviously, with the injuries. Defensively, what I will say is I don't think he was a liability this year, which was a big step forward. He wasn't a positive out there by any stretch of the imagination, but he at least got to the right spots and made it so that the team's defense didn't collapse around him. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's kind of like the Doug McDermott thing, right? Doug McDermott in Chicago and at Creighton was never a good defender, but he was a smart positional defender. So he could, while he wasn't going to make a difference, he would at least be in the right spots and help and everything. I think Jabari got to that level this year, except a way more athletic McDermott, so he can just do a little bit more. I don't know that he was like a massive problem defensively. And I think that goes toward your next point of how much does he help winning. I think if he can get to the point where he is even just slightly below league average, which I would say like is not terribly far off given what we saw, but it all depends on how he bounces back. I do believe that, that's a really big piece for what Milwaukee can do going forward. And I do think he can help actually contribute to winning because he's not an unselfish player. He passes the ball pretty well. He's able to create offense for himself, but it's not, offense out of the rhythm of the offense. You know what I mean? Like this year, it seemed like he took more of a step toward staying in rhythm of the offense.
Yeah, I think that, I just want to see Jabari Middleton and Giannis on the court together because if that happens, this Bucks team is going to be really fun. And Parker, obviously, like he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated when he was a junior in high school, calling him the best high school prospect since LeBron. He's been a guy who's been on the map for so long, still only 22 years old. It would really be a shame if, 2 ACL tears did him in. But I'm always going to have faith in Jabari Parker until his body actually does give up on him because we saw how he came back from the first knee injury. He was averaging 20 a game in what should have been, his senior year of college last year at the NBA level. He was averaging 20 a game following one ACL tear already. So I'm not going to discount him, and I totally agree with you that he's the big swing guy, not only for the Bucks, but really for the NBA landscape when you think about how it impacts Giannis' future.
Yeah, like if he was never able to come back like totally healthy or anything, he would be one of the biggest what-ifs in NBA history for me. Like, that's not an exaggeration. Like, you talk about a kid that was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, like you mentioned, when he was a junior, and, was essentially, we saw his peak at 21 in the NBA due to injuries. Like, that would be a massive what-if over the course of NBA history. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about last year's NBA draft for Milwaukee because I feel like they really nailed it. Malcolm Brogdon was the Rookie of the Year this year. I would have voted for Joel Embiid because, good Lord, he was just incredible. But I understand why the voters picked Malcolm Brogdon, given the actual impact he had on winning this year. Really, really good complementary piece whose ability to play point guard was something I underrated coming out of Virginia. And I was as high on Brogdon as anyone. Like I had him, I think, like 22nd or something on my board, like coming into the draft. Like I had him as a clear first round pick. Was shocked when he didn't go in the first round. The ability to actually handle lead ball duties with a guy like Giannis next to him has been a big step forward for what Milwaukee can do on defense because we all know that Brogdon, two-time ACC Defensive Player of the Year, a really effective defender this year in his first year of NBA play as well at 24 years old. We know what he can do on the defensive end of the floor, and we can know what he can do in terms of being a smart offensive player. It's just a huge boon to be able to slot him in at point guard and be able to play that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that Brogdon's a great example of the value of hitting singles or doubles in the draft once you get that superstar because I think so many times, how good your team is going to be, it's not only dependent on the superstar, it's dependent on the supporting cast. I think Jimmy Butler with the Bulls the last couple of years showed that. Like, he got better and better and better every single year, but the Bulls just kept surrounding him with players who weren't going to be able to maximize his talent. It seemed like he was almost, improving and getting better despite what was around him, like in the face of it. So, in that sense, adding a player like Brogdon, who's just a big guard, who could shoot it, who defends, who's going to be really unselfish, who's not going to take anything off the table, I just think that was a fantastic draft pick by Milwaukee. And, I don't know what his ceiling is, really, but he's already a really super useful player. So
yeah, like I think his ceiling is just slightly more than what we've seen now. But that's fine. He's already a starting caliber NBA player. Like, that's super useful. Thon Maker, I think, is another really big swing piece for them, though, so I want to talk about him in a little bit more depth. Where did you fall on the Thon Maker thing? Because you've seen him as much as I had seen him before the NBA draft in 2016, maybe even more. I had him outside of the first round whenever I rated draft picks because I wasn't sure how things would translate to the NBA, but it's very clear I was wrong. Like, he is very, very clearly a useful NBA player right now due to his mobility, his talent for timing blocked shots, and just being able to stand up to other players already. What do you think of what his eventual development can be, and what do you think of the track that he's on coming from when you saw him at 15 years old until now?
Yeah, I think the thing that was tough to tell about Maker in those high school prep settings was just how quick his feet were. Like, a lot of times teams are playing more like zone defense or straight up man-to-man. It's not like, you're not really asking the big man to hedge a pick and roll a lot of times in high school basketball, but that's obviously one of the most crucial skills an NBA big man can have. And, Maker was able to move his feet with NBA point guards like Kyle Lowry in the playoffs. I mean, he was able to do that throughout the end of the season, which I think is going to be really big. His shooting stroke, I mean, it's just going to get better, I would say. He's already decent. You can tell he's comfortable taking that shot from NBA range. So, Maker, I don't know where his ball skills are exactly. I don't think he's quite the handler that we saw in that high school mixtape way back in the day. I don't know if he's someone who you're going to be asking to create offense, but I think, in a sense, Maker all along was a guy who everyone thought had a really high ceiling because of some of the ball skills he flashed and the shooting ability. In the end, I think he's a guy with a high floor, just because he's going to be able to challenge shots, he's going to be able to move his feet. And, anytime you can find a big man with that type of mobility, I think you have a player you can keep.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the key here is that he is more of a high floor player than the high ceiling player he was portrayed as. The ability to move the feet, as you mentioned. I'm a little bit more skeptical on the jump shot. It's always been very flat. Even this year, it still continued to be pretty flat, although I'm sure he's making strides there. The confidence factor is a very important one for shooters, especially young ones that are developing. It's probably not worth putting a cap on what he is capable of from three. The ball handling stuff I don't think is really ever going to translate, but that's fine. The key with Thon is that he's an incredibly hard worker. He's an incredibly high character kid that, those are the kids that do see the improvement, the market improvement that you really are hoping for from young NBA players. And I did the top 25 players, 23 and under list. He was probably one of the next 6 or so guys that just missed that list. And the reason was I just thought the other guys kind of had a higher ceiling. But I would venture that his career will be better than quite a few guys on that list because I think his floor is better.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, he's still someone, too, who, I'm not going to discount his ceiling just because, we've seen that he's already surpassed expectations to an extent so far in his young career. So, we'll see what Thon Maker's capable of. I don't really want to put a cap on what he can do. I just sort of want to enjoy his evolution as a player because so many times we see someone from such a young age get hyped up like that only to never really make an impact. And he made an impact immediately. So,
yeah. So what do you think the overall outlook for this year is for Milwaukee? And the reason that I'm spending more time on Milwaukee and Cleveland is because I feel like the next 3 teams will not necessarily earn as much time. But, what do you think that the ceiling is for the Milwaukee Bucks this year? Do we think that they can, get that 50-win threshold? Do we think that they kind of settle in right around, 42 for a year while they continue to develop? What is your thought on where this team is for this season alone?
Yeah, a lot of it comes back to Jabari's health, I think. I mean, when's Jabari going to start playing again? Around Christmas, around, March 1st. So that's going to be a big thing. But I would say, 40, 47, 48 wins is not out of the question for them. I would expect them to potentially, they're going to be a top 5 Eastern Conference team, I think.
Yeah, I think that that's right. They're somewhere in that top 5. If they finished with a home playoff series in the first round, I wouldn't be totally shocked. Another guy that I want to point out real quick is that, you being a Chicago guy, Tony Snell took that next kind of leap forward with Milwaukee.
Snell was great for them.
And I feel like they signed him to a deal that I thought that might get out of hand. I thought that he could end up with 460 or something coming into the offseason, and I would hate that deal. But they got him under a pretty sensible 44 deal, somewhere in that range. And at $11 million a year, right now he's probably not an $11 million player a year, but he can get there for sure, and he's not overpaid drastically already, which I think is really, really important for keeping their cap situation kind of under wraps and under control.
Yeah, I mean, Snell, he's always been better theoretically than I mean, than in practice. Yeah, he's been better in theory than in practice. Always. I just think that he's so passive. He's like he kind of plays scared, or at least he did on the Bulls for so long. I never thought he had a really high feel for the game either. I think he just made a lot of boneheaded plays. But I mean, you have to be impressed by what he did last year. I think it's pretty damning that the Bulls just gave up a $50 million player for Michael Carter-Williams. I mean, couldn't even make the team basically.
Offensively, I agree with you on the passiveness for sure. Defensively, he's the furthest thing from passive. He is awesome on defense.
Yeah.
Like, he is so useful. He's like a little bit lesser of a Robert Covington, where he moves his feet super well and uses his hands really well to disrupt. Covington for me last year was like one of the 15 or 20 best defenders in the NBA. Snell is not that level yet, but if he got to the point where he was a top 20 defender in the NBA, I think that's in the cards. Like, I think it's very possible.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and move on. But before we do that, let's get a message real quick from FanDuel. Fantasy football fans, the wait is nearly over. Football is now back. That means FanDuel is back. Fantasy football for everyday fans. New contests starting every week. That means no busted seasons. There is something for everyone. A lot of contests to choose from. Starting at just $1. Just pick a contest, choose your team, and watch your score in real time. Did you use daily fantasy this weekend? Because I know that for the Bears particularly, you had Tariq Cohen going off.
Tariq Cohen going ham, dude. He's the best. He's the one player I needed to get me into the Bears this year.
You just needed that one guy to like
bring some sort of excitement. Player, dude. The Bears never have any cool players. They've had a cool player in 5 years. So the fact that we have Tariq Cohen now, it's just great.
Yeah, like, forget Mitch Trubisky, forget whatever. Tariq Cohen is where Ricky wants to live, and Tariq Cohen is where you guys should live whenever you're picking your DFS teams. Over 2.5 million players have won a cash prize playing fantasy sports on FanDuel. I'm sure if you would have picked Tariq Cohen this weekend, you probably would have won a prize. Sign up today, go to FanDuel.com, click the Join Now button, and use my code GAMETHEORY. That's GAMETHEORY. Try FanDuel for free with no deposit required. Visit FanDuel.com to claim your free contest and play for a share of $10,000. Just sign up using the promo code GameTheory. That's FanDuel.com. Promo code GameTheory, void where prohibited. Let's talk about your Chicago Bulls, Ricky.
You have to?
Yeah, I know. Not a whole lot of excitement. Not a whole lot of reason for optimism this year. But they're still more interesting than both the Pacers and Pistons to me, because there's the Dwayne Wade situation. There's Zach LaVine coming back from injury. There's the fact that Nikola Mirotic is still just randomly out on the restricted free agency market. Chris Dunn is a buy low piece that I will stake out a plot on Chris Dunn Island and be very happy. I might be the only proprietor on the Chris Dunn Island at some point, but that is a place I will live and be happy with. So before we get into all of the specifics here, what are your thoughts on the Bulls? Like, what do we think of, this team? Do we think that they are the worst team in the NBA? Do we think that going into the year, they should probably be the favorite for the number one overall pick?
I'm calling this the process without the enthusiasm. I feel like the Bulls are going for, the total tear it down rebuild, but when the Sixers were doing it, the fans always had the peace of mind that they had the smartest man in the room calling the shots in Sam Hinkie. And I think the Bulls probably have, the least intelligent people in the room, which is the way they run their organization. They don't have a big scouting department. They don't, they've never done a ton of homework in terms of evaluating prospects. They haven't drafted a good player since Jimmy in 2011 at this point. So, what do I think of the Bulls in general? I think it's going to be a long year. I think that, if they could get something out of Lauri Markkanen, he would be the most exciting guy on the team. And I would expect them to be among the worst teams in the league. I think that they could be the worst team in the league. Because the thing is that, in the end, the other bad teams have good coaches. I think that Budenholzer is one of the best coaches in the league in Atlanta. I think Kenny Atkinson showed a lot of good things in Brooklyn last year. And then Hoiberg, I just don't know what Hoiberg has done for the Bulls up to this point. I can't really name one positive thing he's done for the team in his 2 years. So perhaps this roster will finally fit the way Hoiberg wants to play, and the Bulls will sort of be a fun but bad but high-scoring team. I'd be totally cool with that. But in the end, Hoiberg just hasn't given me a reason to believe in him as an NBA head coach, which actually ends up being an added benefit of this tank job, because if you have, the Hawks are still going to try to win games, at least until the end of the season. Like, they're going to actively try to win games, despite the fact that they don't have a very talented roster.
Yep.
The Bulls, I just don't know if they have the personnel or the coaching to win more than 20, 21, 22 games. I think that's the kind of season we're looking at.
So how long is Dwayne Wade going to be a Chicago Bull?
I don't know. I could see that getting ugly, just because the Bulls aren't going to want to give him the full contract. They should, I think, just pay him to get him away from the team, I think. But a big part of the reason the Bulls signed him is just so that they could have someone to market, someone to help sell tickets, and all that. So I would expect that Wade is on the team until, I'll say, after Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Between maybe even after the All-Star break. Like, is there a buyout deadline? I expect that to go down to the end, really.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I was hoping that it would happen, December. But yeah. I think that you're probably right when accounting for the marketing idea here. How excited have you been about what you've seen from Lauri Markkanen over in Finland or Iceland? I think it's in Iceland now that I think about it. It's kind of all over the map in Europe with Eurobasket.
Right. Markkanen looked amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I was one of the people who thought that they should have taken Malik Monk or Dennis Smith with that pick, but Markkanen, he looked really good. He looked quicker than I remember him at Arizona. I think, a lot of times with just the defense Arizona plays, that pack line defense, guys aren't going to be able to show the full extent of their athleticism. I think Aaron Gordon, who's a total freak athlete, is even a good example of that. But, Markkanen, obviously, if he's even an average NBA athlete, I think that's going to be a big boost for the Bulls, just because he's going to have that special skill as an elite three-point shooter, 7 feet tall. I thought he was exploding to finish above the basket better than I saw him at Arizona, too. He was showing off some post-game, which I didn't see much at Arizona. So to me, that's the thing with Markkanen. Like, he's 7 feet tall, one of the greatest 7-foot shooters I've ever seen. Now the thing is that he's just going to have to get better every single year. Like, Dirk did not have that post game coming into the league. He developed it. He got better. It helped make him a legend. You don't want to compare him to Dirk at all. I'm just saying, like, he's going to have to continue adding stuff to his game, because what he is right now is sort of a specialist. But he is still 20 years old. He has plenty of room for growth, I think. And, something like him being able to hit fadeaway jumpers out of the post, if that's just another way he can get his offense instead of just being a catch and shoot guy. I think that's going to be huge for him. So as long as he just continues to incrementally develop, I'd say, his Eurobasket performance was very promising.
Yeah, I agreed with you that I probably would have taken either Dennis Smith or Malik Monk over him, but I had him in the same tier as those guys. Like, I was someone who believed in the offensive ceiling of Markkanen. I even believed that the defense would be okay mobility-wise. Whether or not he's going to be a rim protector as a center, I think that's very much up for debate. But I agree with you 100%. Whenever you talk about the Arizona defense, you talk about the defenses that Konzo Martin runs. Like, we'll probably be talking about Michael Porter's steals and blocks at some point this coming year, just because if you look at Konzo's defensive scheme, it just doesn't lend itself with the conservative nature of it to getting out and getting steals and getting out and getting into passing lanes and weak side help blocks and stuff. But Markkanen's fine. Like, I think he's going to be a really good NBA player for sure. Chris Dunn, do you have any faith?
I really like his defense. They should just unleash him on defense. I want Chris Dunn picking people up as soon as they cross half court, or even before that, just giving them hell defensively, because I think that that's going to be his way to make his niche in the league. He's going to have to really turn himself into a truly elite defensive player. And then offensively, I think the hope is, especially if you have Markkanen and Mirotic, you're going to have some shooting in the front court. Can he get to the rim and finish at the rim? He's got the length to do it. I would think, he always showed sort of the athletic grace and the agility to do it, I thought, at Providence. But that's going to be the key for him. He's not going to be someone who you're really banking on the jump shot. I just want to see him continue to improve in the pick and roll. I always thought he was a really good pick and roll guard when he was in college. So I want to see him be able to, get to the hoop out of the pick and roll, finish at the rim, and then just, really make his money playing defense.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that he can be like a, top 30 point guard in the NBA still, which might be asking a lot, but, I will still stake out my plot on Kristone Island just due to the defensive floor that he's already shown. Zach LaVine, before his injury last year, was really coming on as an offensive weapon. Averaged right around 19 points and 3 rebounds, 3 assists. He was a guy that I think I got more shit for leaving him off of my top 25, 23 and under players than any other player in the league. What my concerns are, and I kind of want to go into this a little bit more quickly, is that he's a guy whose game is so based on athleticism, and he's still a guy who, is very reliant on getting out in transition. He's someone who's already one of the 5 worst defenders in the NBA, probably. And I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that. I'm concerned that while he does have a high skill level, while he does have a really, really strong offensive game shooting the basketball and he can handle the ball, I'm worried that if you take away just that 10% of athleticism that an ACL injury could, that could happen with an ACL injury, I am worried that it could really, really have adverse effects on the rest of his game.
Yeah, that's true. But the thing is that LaVine is such a freak athlete that he might even have that extra 10% of room that other people don't have, where he's still going to be, faster and quicker than most of the guys he's matched up with. Certainly, I think that what you said is a big concern for the Bulls, though, and it's going to be something that's really interesting in how they handle his next contract. He's going to want to come back as soon as possible so he can put up big numbers, get a big contract. The Bulls are going to want him to get healthy. I foresee that being an issue one way or another. The Bulls are just they're not going to handle that well. I'll just go ahead and predict that right now. And then the other thing, too, is so if he's not going to be literally the greatest athlete on earth anymore, who knows? But let's just assume that maybe he's going to lose a little bit of his athleticism. I'd like to see the game slow down for him. That's still a lot to ask, but he was never a very good passer. He was never someone who was able to pick his spots to get to the foul line very well. So I would like to see those two aspects of his offensive game improve. I think, especially as a passer, he's just going to have to be a little bit more unselfish. And then just find some way to get some easy points, man. Because, his ability to shoot the ball off the dribble at deep range is phenomenal. I just want him to, continue rounding out the other skill aspects of his offensive repertoire.
Well, he's just a perimeter player on offense in the half court. You know what I mean? He's not a guy who's going to get into the lane consistently. He just doesn't. He's not super strong, and his handle in the open floor is great, but in the half court it hasn't shown to be incredible whenever he's trying to attack closeouts and everything. So I think that that's the next step of his game. He needs to get a little bit stronger, and he needs to be able to attack the rim more consistently in the half court, kind of as you mentioned. The thing that's worth noting with LaVine, though, is that he is an awesome hard worker from what I've been told from people around him. He's going to be chomping at the bit to get back on the floor, not only just due to his contract, but also just due to the nature of the way his mind works. He wants to really get out there as soon as possible. Is there anything else you want to talk about with the Bulls? I feel like those are the, really interesting aspects of them. Do you think they should pick up Cameron Payne's option? I feel that's, I agree.
Not.
Yeah. Do we think Denzel Valentine takes a leap?
I like Valentine.
Do you?
Yeah, I've always liked Valentine. I mean, he's an easy player to scout because he's just so slow. But he could really handle and shoot it. I think that, when he got into a rhythm last year, he did show off the fact that he can hit from NBA range consistently with his three-point shot. So I expect Valentine to have a pretty good year, and I think that, the ball's going to be in his hands a lot because they're just going to need someone to make plays. This team is going to be really, really, really bad. They're just going to need someone to soak up possession. So I think that Valentine is going to be a guy who can have the ball in his hands a lot, make some passes, hopefully shoot with deep range. You'll see Zipser a little bit. I think, having a 3-4 swing guy like him was a really good second-round pick. And I'd like to see what Felicio could do, too. I mean, Robin Lopez is a very good, useful player, but at this point he sort of is what he is. If they could unload him and have Felicio as a starting center at $8 million a year for a rebuilding team is a lot better than Felicio as a backup center making $8 million a year for a rebuilding team. So I wouldn't mind to see him let Lopez go if they could even find someone to take him.
Yeah, real quick, I do want to say that I love the idea of pairing Valentine with Chris Dunn. You could hide Valentine a little bit easier on defense. You could let Valentine maybe initiate offense with his passing and vision a little bit more. That would seem like a really good pairing in my head, at least. Getting to Felicio, I mean, to be honest, I have not seen anything from him yet that makes me think he's more than a minimum backup center. But the ceiling, I guess.
Well, he's making $8 million a year, so they certainly gave him a lot more than that. They totally bid against themselves for Felicio. Like, I was happy they kept Felicio. I was a big Felicio fan, but I think they looked at the contract centers got last year, and they're like, "Oh shit, it's going to happen again." And now, like, there's way better players than Felicio, like, still on the market, like Nerlens and like Plumlee. So they totally bid against themselves for Felicio. I'm glad Chris got the hookup because he's worked hard.
Yeah,
he's one of the few likable guys on the team, I think. But I mean, they just gave him a lot of money for really no reason. Like, they probably could have gotten him for like $3 million a year if you just look at the way the center market eventually unfolded.
Yeah, look, like, I'm ecstatic for Cristiano Felicio that he got this money. Like, that is, his story is one of the most incredible in the NBA, given where he came from in Brazil, which is not exactly a basketball powerhouse. Whenever he came up, he's 25 years old. His initial draft year was like 6 years ago. Like, the fact that he is where he is now is really remarkable. Yeah, that was an overpay. I'll just say that. The last thing I want to say is Nikola Mirotic. What would you pay him? Like, what do you even do with Nick Mirotic now?
It's got to be the qualifying offer for Mirotic, and then you just see. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if Mirotic rules this year, because I always thought they should have empowered him, and instead he was watching Dwayne Wade or Pau Gasol like jab step for 15 seconds on the shot clock.
Yeah,
and he was just being reduced to a corner spot up shooter a lot of times, which was not his best role. I think he needs the ball in his hands a lot on the perimeter, and I'd like to see him like be running pick and rolls and to be like making plays off the dribble and stuff. So I would not be surprised if he has a big year, which Bulls fans will hate. They already don't like Mirotic, and if he's really good after they get rid of Jimmy, they're going to be so upset, especially when the whole goal for the year is to try to get the highest draft pick possible. But I say bring back Mirotic on the qualifying offer, and I would not be surprised if he turns in a really good season, for better or worse.
So if I was the Bulls, I would be trying to get Mirotic on like a 3-year, $33 million contract or something. I wouldn't want him for longer than that. I'd even be willing to give him a player option on the third year. I would just want to maintain that asset flexibility. You know what I mean? Like, having him on maybe even make it if you can make it a team option, that'd be great, so that you can just kind of cut bait if necessary. But like, I just want to be able to have him on like a 2-year deal, essentially. You know what I mean? That way he maintains his asset value while also, providing professionalism as a basketball player. Like, we know for sure that he's at least an NBA player, right?
Yeah, I mean, I still think he could be pretty good.
Oh, so do I. Like, I think he can be a starter in the NBA, but like the floor is like, okay, he's a good rotation player.
Yeah, I mean, the floor is that he takes more off the table than he brings to it with some of his shot selection. And,
yeah, that's true.
But his defense is actually a lot better than people realize, even a lot of Bulls fans realize. There was times last year when I said only half in jest that his defense is better than his offense. Because he would like compete, he would rebound, he'd try to block some shots, so... I would keep Mirotic around because it's like, at this point, you invested so much in him. You have nothing to lose. Now there's no expectations for him as a player. When, after his rookie year, he was second in Rookie of the Year voting behind Andrew Wiggins. People really thought that he could have been a great player. A lot of Bulls fans did, I know. That hasn't happened in the 2 seasons since then. So if you can just get him on the qualifying offer, I'd just be like, whatever, take him. I mean, the Bulls, their asset management is just so atrocious as it is that even if they were to lock him up, I just don't see how they would like maximize him because, we've seen this time and time again. They just botch asset management constantly. So
let's move on and talk about the next team on this list. And I will pose a question to you. Do the Indiana Pacers have the weirdest roster in the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, you would have to think so. Who's even starting for point guard for the Pacers this year?
I would think it's probably Corey Joseph, but it could be Darren Collison.
Oh, right. I forgot about Corey Joseph.
They have both Corey Joseph and Darren Collison. Like, they're probably going to have like a league average, like not a league average, but like an actual starting quality level point guard between those two.
And, Corey Joseph and Oladipo, they could get after you defensively. At least if Oladipo's mindset is there on the defensive end. Who's their 3 after Paul George left?
They still have Thaddeus Young.
He's a 4.
He's a 4. They did sign Bojan Bogdanovic. Like, maybe that's the move. Maybe you start Corey Joseph and Victor Oladipo and start Bojan at the 3 and be able to hide him a little bit better.
It's going to be Bogdanovic for sure.
Yeah, and then like Thaddeus Young at the 4 and Miles Turner at the 5.
And then you have Sabonis.
Still have Sabonis.
That's a weird roster.
Still have Al Jefferson, I believe, roster. Right?
Yeah.
Like, Lance Stevenson is on that team. Weird. Glenn Robinson is still on that team too, I think, right? Like, they have a weird roster that is somewhere between trying to compete for like the 8 seed, but also probably not good enough to compete for the 8 seed. So you're stuck kind of, in between two worlds. Like, they're the between two ferns team in the NBA this year.
Yeah, and they're not going to be bad enough to get one of these, to get a shot at Doncic or Bagley or Porter. I don't think they will be. I mean, I might be wrong about that, but I would expect them to. They're not going to be a team that's like flat out tanking.
Yeah,
like they're going to make a run at the 8 seed. I bet someone's going to have to do it.
No, they are. I think that's going to be their goal. Like, unless they can find like a Thaddeus Young trade partner and. They're not going to trade Oladipo. Like, I feel like that's how they're going to sell tickets this year, is marketing around Oladipo and Turner. And then they have Sabonis. Like, this is a weird roster. I don't understand the way that this roster works.
So the real question is, long term, what do you think of the Sabonis Miles Turner front court? Like, do you think that is there's enough mobility in that front court for that to like actually be the long-term front court of the future? What do you think of that pairing?
Well, I think that you throw TJ Leaf in that mix as well. As kind of a triumvirate of, 4 or 5s. I'm nervous. I think TJ Leaf in a vacuum is a really good fit with Miles Turner, but TJ needs to show that he is an NBA player for sure. Still, like, he's a very smart player, really good passer. The jump shot is something that a lot of people are worried about because it's a very slow developing jump shot with a low release point. He's a really hard worker, though, so I would assume that, as he continues to age and mature, he can get that around and get it to the point where it's a little bit more consistent for people. Glenn Robinson is interesting as like a 3.
He's okay.
Yeah. Like he's an NBA player, Robinson. I think. Yeah. Then like they still have Al Jefferson too, which is weird. Like, how do you kind of work around that aspect? I don't know, man. This is a weird roster.
The Pacers' best hope is that, because I really thought Sabonis was going to be awesome when he was in that draft, and I still think he has plenty of potential. So, like, imagine Sabonis and Turner. Like, Sabonis can just, like, push people around. He's a big, active body. I imagine that is, like, sort of a dominant NFL front line where they're just, like, road grading in a sense, where they can Sabonis can dominate the glass. Turner can give you a stretch option in the front court, and he's got the length to protect the rim. Theoretically, that could be a pretty good front court if Sabonis ends up being as good as I think he is. You would think that he would be able to take on some of the rebounding and toughness deficiencies that maybe Turner doesn't show, and then Turner would be able to add the higher skill level shooting range that Sabonis doesn't have. I think that, if Sabonis gets really good, I'm a big Turner fan as it is, and I think that he's only going to get better. Like, that could sort of be the Pacers' sneaky avenue to success down the road, I think, if those two guys could form a really intriguing front line.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, if you remember Sabonis at Gonzaga, like, there'd be times they'd throw him on Kyle Collinsworth from BYU. Like, he can actually move his feet pretty well. That's an interesting idea that I kind of like, because Sabonis is kind of that killer rebounder that Miles Turner hasn't really shown himself to be yet. Maybe that would maybe that would work. I dig that. I actually the more I think about it, the more I do dig that.
And then I want the Pacers to be the Eastern Conference Grizzlies, where like everyone else is going with like wings at the 4, and they're still starting like two traditional big men. You can have Oladipo sort of as the energy Tony Allen role. I want Pacers as Eastern Conference Grizzlies down the road behind the Sabonis Miles Turner front court.
I think this is like a sneaky decent bet to make the playoffs. Like, I think you can get them at like 3-1 to make the playoffs right now. Like, I think that that's not a bad bet. Like, this team is not an absolute disaster. Like, look at the teams in the Eastern Conference that they're clearly better than. They're clearly better than the Nets. I think they're probably better than the Knicks. They're clearly better than Orlando. They're clearly better than Atlanta. They're better than the Bulls. So that's 5 right there. So you have them at like 10 already. Like, could they kind of just accidentally surpass Detroit, and maybe Philly doesn't fire on all cylinders, and maybe like one of Charlotte or Miami doesn't really hit in the way that we're thinking they could? Like if you can get 3-1 or 4-1 odds on that, like I might take that bet.
Yeah, the fact is someone's going to have to make it at the end of the Eastern Conference, and it's going to have to be someone who wants to make it. And the Pacers just seem like a team who will probably want to make the playoffs following, letting go Paul George.
Yeah. This is just going to be a competent team this year, assuming that like Nate McMillan allows them to be competent. But We'll see if that's the case. I was not a fan of the Oladipo and Sabonis for Paul George deal.
They could have done better than that for sure.
They should have done better than that long term. But for this year, I feel like, that actually might make this look decent. I don't know that we need to talk about the Pacers anymore, though. They're just a weird roster. But at least the weirdness of their roster, in the way that it at least makes competent sense, pales in comparison to the boringness of this Detroit Pistons roster, I think. Like, I will watch fewer Detroit Pistons games this year than I think I will watch of any other team.
Pistons are just like a train wreck, man. It really seemed like when Sam Van Gundy came in there, Drummond was going to be his Dwight Howard. He seemed like he found a good guard in Reggie Jackson, where if you're going to surround him with shooters, Reggie Jackson would probably be a pretty good pick-and-roll playmaker with Drummond. And then Reggie Jackson's just been so bad, and Drummond's really stagnated as a player. But this Pistons team, they still have some guys I like. I still believe in Stanley Johnson, but it's been 2 years, he hasn't really done much yet.
Yep.
I don't know. I got no takes on the Pistons at this point, really.
That's the thing. Like, I have no strong opinions on this Detroit Pistons team. Like, so they go out and get Avery Bradley. Well, he just steps right into what Kentavious Caldwell-Pope did. And Bradley is certainly better than KCP, but they're essentially kind of the same role player, at least. You know what I mean? Like, Avery can be maybe like a borderline all-star at his absolute ceiling. But, KCP is pretty good. And, they're similar level players, and that they're probably better off defending ones than twos and threes. And, a little bit limited off the dribble and can knock down threes whenever they're hot. Like, it's the same kind of guy, just a little bit better. And, Reggie Jackson is an issue just because we don't know what to expect from him. And, they go out and sign Langston Galloway to a deal that didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, given the fact that it pushed them all the way up against the apron. And Luke Kennard was a draft pick that I dug because they very clearly just need offense, but I don't know that he's going to be ready to play in year one. And then they took Henry Ellenson the year before, whenever they had designs on signing John Lore and Boban. Like, nothing about the way this roster has been built makes competent sense to me, I guess. I'm very confused on what their tactics are.
Totally. And Stan, the thing about Stan is he always seemed like someone who was working with a plan. Like, he had this template for how to build a good team. I think it started with Drummond.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you needed a point guard. Go ahead. I was just going to say, when they sort of whiffed on Reggie Jackson, that just sent this down a death spiral.
Well, the problem is the biggest question of all of this is, did they whiff on Andre Drummond? Did they whiff? And I don't mean on as a draft pick 10th overall. I mean as a guy that they just gave a max contract to, where he still has 4 more years left under his deal, with the 4th year being a player option that might just end up being really bad, where he'll take the player option. He took a step back last year, I thought. I've seen some people online say that he was basically the same player last year as he was the year before. I don't really agree with that, to be honest. His defense was worse last year. He shot, basically the same percentage from the field. I guess that he's still just the biggest liability in the NBA from the foul line. He's still one of the best rebounders in the NBA. But if all you're going to be is a rebound, put back, pick and roll center without a great pick and roll point guard, I don't know how much value that guy has whenever the defense just isn't going to be there.
Yeah, he's someone who's going to need to remake himself as just a badass on defense. Because offensively, he's definitely just going to be a set a screen and dive to the basket type guy. Like, he's never going to have any ball skills or any shooting. So he's just going to have to become a beast on defense in a league that's downsizing. 280 pounds Andre Drummond, who can, still dunk a basketball between his legs. That could be a good way to zag when the rest of the league zigs in a sense, but that only happens if he really commits himself to the defensive end and just turns into the bully that he's capable of being physically.
Physically, he's capable of just about anything, I feel like, when it comes to athletic,
Besides from making a free throw.
Right, like when it comes to like athletic, bursts, I guess. Like shooting and skill stuff, that's just never going to be there. Like he's never going to be a good passer, never going to be a free throw shooter, never going to be a shooter in general. But if he can just continue to be the best offensive rebounding weapon in the NBA, if he can be the right diver going toward the basket on pick and rolls, and he can be a high-end defender. That is the key. He needs to add that third aspect to be useful. Then he can be one of the top 25 players in the NBA. But I don't, I just don't know what we've seen from him that makes us think that he wants that, I guess. Like, do you kind of feel that way? Like, I don't know that he wants that.
Yeah, it just seems like he's stagnated a bit. And I think that, everything about the Detroit situation is just weird right now. You got to wonder how much time Stan's going to have left.
Do you think he's tradable right now?
Drummond, yeah. It's like, who wants a center at all?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's the deepest position in the NBA. He's now on a deal that's basically $100 million left for 4 years. Like, is anyone gonna want to take that risk on a center? I don't even know. Like, maybe
I don't think so.
Maybe someone would, like, just as an idea. Like, I heard like people like bringing up the Celtics as a potential plan, but like just because they have the rebounding woes. But I don't.
God, he'd be awesome on the Celtics. I didn't even think about that.
I don't know that I dig that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like maybe like you'd have to play him and Horford together, and that's not going to be a mobile place. Right.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird situation with Drummond, and I don't know what to make of it. Like he could be an awesome player, but he's not there yet. Like he is. I don't think he's a negative on the floor by any stretch. He is still like he's still their best player, to be sure.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't think that's good enough for them. If they're pinning their hopes to him, which they clearly are, I don't think that's good enough.
Totally agree, and that's why the Pistons are the least interesting team in this altogether not all that interesting division.
Yeah, like, would you rather be building around D'Angelo Russell or Andre Drummond at this stage?
Wow. I guess Russell, just because he's a guard. He's a guard who can handle and pass and shoot, so I guess I'll take my chances with Russell over Drummond.
Yeah, like, regardless of which one of those you're taking your chances. Like it's a risk. I think I would rather have Russell. I do. I think I'm at that stage. I would. Drummond is an all-star already, but I just don't know that we're. I don't know that we're there. He's fine. Stanley Johnson and Tobias Harris, I think, are going to be two really big players here too. They need something from that like combo forward position, and I think those are the two guys that can really bring it for them. Maybe Reggie Bullock brings something. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know what to think of this roster. It's just not fun.
Yeah.
Weird team. They'll having said that though, we've just like shit on them kind of. They're going to win somewhere between 35 and 45 games and like probably be somewhere in like the 7 to 9 or 10 seed range. So like there's a decent chance they're in the playoffs this year.
I agree. That's just another damning sentiment on the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, it really is. Ricky, let's get out of here. Is there anything you want to plug? Anything you want to talk about? Do you have any takes? Have you seen good movies recently? Have you seen? You have some really fire life takes from time to time. I just want to hear what's going on in the life of Ricky O'Donnell.
I don't have anything that exciting. I guess the one thing we're doing at work right now is the SB Nation College Hoops Top 25 Countdown. We got up St. Mary's today, who I think is going to be a pretty fun team, and that's going to continue all the way up until the start of the season. So if you're a loyal listener of the Game Theory podcast who enjoys Sam's college basketball talk, swing over to SB Nation College Basketball as well, and we've got a pretty fun top 25 countdown we're doing right now.
Anytime that guys like Ricky O'Donnell and Mike Rutherford are on the same site together, they're both tremendous writers of college basketball content. I would please implore you to go ahead and read all of their work. They are great over there. Is that it, Ricky? Anything else good?
That's it. I think we're good.
Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the Game Theory Podcast on iTunes. It really helps us move up in the ratings and really helps more people get exposed to the podcast. We'll be back on Wednesday. We're going to do, I believe, an SEC basketball preview at that stage with someone who used to work in that league last year. So I'm really excited to do that. Beyond that, though, just keep it locked here and keep it locked at The Athletic. You can start subscribing there. We'll be active at the Fieldhouse starting on October 2nd. So once that gets active, I'm going to be going pretty hardcore every day on previews and getting stuff up for the college basketball season. So until next time, we will talk soon. Bye.